meetings is in violation of the rules of the House. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2025, the gentleman from Arizona missed for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I've missed all of you. I don't know if you missed me, but we're going to actually try something tonight, and some of what we're going to do this evening is a little bit complex. It's going to be a little bit thick, but we've double-checked and triple-checked a portion of the math, which means a number of our brothers and sisters will turn their ears off almost immediately because, remember, we all work in a math-free zone. Couple clean items of order first. I want to thank, I think it is, though I don't know if they were screwing with me or having some fun, I think it's Forbes breaking news, took like 12, 13 hours of these floor speeches and put them up on YouTube. And I've actually had a couple people who obviously don't have lives who've been watching them, and we've been playing this game of, here's the prediction, Schweikert, you made over the last year, here's what you got right, and here's what you got wrong. Let's first do, I got wrong my prediction on interest rates. I really thought the 10-year bond would be closer to 5, it's at 4.1. But things like the US getting downgraded, things like the semi-glutites crashing in price by the end of the year, we've actually gotten right. But the one thing I wish I had gotten wrong was the debt and deficit projections. And for the trolls out there who immediately go, well, there's all this spending in the tax bill. Most of that hasn't started yet. If you actually look at the breakdown of what's going on, what are the two drivers of U.S. sovereign debt? It's the very things that we're not allowed to talk about. It's interest and demographics. And we're going to walk through some of the reality of the math because this is how perverse this place has become. The Democrats, well, they'll blame, and Republicans will blame, and we're going to blame shiny objects, things that actually have almost no actual value to our future, to this republic and where we're going. Okay, so as we start this, I need everyone to embrace a couple factoids. You got 7 years, and the Social Security Trust Fund is empty. And no one stole the money. We just didn't have enough young people to keep the ratios. So in 7 years, the math right now says a 24% cut. In 7 years, we double senior poverty in America. In 7 years, the math says you're going to start to see baby boomers doubling homelessness. In 7 years, the Medicare trust fund is empty. Hospitals right now and others who are part of the Medicare Part A cash flow take about an 11% cut. In 7 years, we double the spending on Medicare. We go from $1 trillion right now to $2 trillion. It's demographics. And I'm going to show you some of those charts. But let's first walk through the craziness. And look, I've had some administration folks and other folks talk to me about, look, tax receipts are up, and they are. And there's a whole series of things we've done to reduce spending. We have. But none of it appears to be big enough to deal with the cost of the refinancing of debt that's coming off the very low interest rates from a few years ago to the much higher interest rates today, to the medical inflation, to the healthcare utilization, to just the things that are basic, driven by our demographics. So let's deal with some reality. And if you have a question about my math, you can look it up online. Go to the Treasury's website. But this is important. We're now 51 days, I believe, into the new fiscal year. So we're 51 days. Do you realize we've now borrowed $628 billion in the first 51 days of this new fiscal year? Yeah, Treasury has put more, is holding almost $900 billion in cash, which they typically operate with about $800 billion because of the in and out. But you start to realize at the current borrowing rate, we crossed $1 trillion this fiscal year before Christmas. And it's not Republican or Democrat, it's demographics and interest. But that isn't a lot of fun because our political consultants need something where we can attack each other. But by doing that, we are incapable of an honest conversation of the bleed. Understand a basic principle. At this rate of borrowing, when you're clicking off $1 trillion in just 4 months, 5 months, you've decided the bond market basically is the most powerful organization in ruling your country. It's not us as policymakers, it's not the White House, it's the bond market. Because if you do the last 12 months, we've been borrowing about $6.3 billion a day. So far this last 51 days, we're borrowing closer to $12 billion a day. It's just math. Except we're incapable of actually talking about it. Think about these microphones here, Mr. Speaker. How many people, since we got back from the shutdown, have you heard on the left, on the right, get behind these things and say, hey guys, the greatest threat to your republic is actually the math. Yeah, this group hates something Donald Trump does. Our side doesn't like some things they do. And okay, great. The lack of civility is crushing. But one of my personal theories is the reason you just had a 40-some day shutdown is it's not like the old days where you could have bought the senators' votes. Hey, if you'll vote for us, you get a bridge. We're now having to deal with the fact you don't have cash laying around. We will borrow, and you're going to start to see this. We went from $37 trillion to $38 trillion. We did that in 71 days. And look, there was lots of excuses for this. There was, hey, we had the debt ceiling, we had to repopulate, pay back the internal debt borrowing we did, those things. Except the difference is, here we are into the new fiscal year after the debt ceiling's been raised, and the burn rate still looks really similar. But I'm sure all the committees, all the leadership, all the folks who are helping us watch the bond market and the liquidity and our ability to borrow are all paying attention to the bleed rate. But it's math, it's real. And look, our debt to GDP when we closed the 25 fiscal year actually got slightly better, but we also rolled some of the borrowing into the next day, which hit a new fiscal year. So look, it happens all the time. You have strike dates of when you can actually pay certain bills, but this one isn't in question. Last year, for every dollar of tax receipts, we took in, this is customs duties, this is excise tax, income tax, corporate tax, everything we took in. We spent $1.43. This year, for every dollar we take in, our budget says we're going to also spend $1.43. How long can we do this? How long can we do this? And look, my 3-year-old, and yes, I'm this age, my wife's my age, we have a 10-year-old and 3-year-old. There's a data set out there that basically says when my 3-year-old is about 22, 23 years old, so 20-some years ago, every tax in America, every tax needs to be doubled just to maintain baseline spending. Mr. Speaker, how many people have you had come behind this mic and just said, look, is this moral? Is this really what America's all about? And yes, I'm going to show the slides that show what the Democrats say is, well, we'll just tax billionaires and rich people. It doesn't get you anything close. It doesn't close the gap, and you know it. And for our side, we're going to cut spending. Really? It doesn't get you close. because we're not really ready to have the revolution of how we spend money. Because adopting the very technologies, the cures, the things we can do, the army of lobbyists outside this door lose their blanket minds because we're requiring them to either change their business models or make the bureaucracy do it differently, or maybe come up with the conclusion we shouldn't do it at all. Once again, for every dollar we take in tax receipts, we're going to spend $1.43. Why doesn't that almost create a sense of panic, of agina for the left or the right? Is it just we run into the problem of telling the truth to our voters after maybe we've lied to them? It's rich people we don't tax enough. It's waste and fraud. It's illegals. All of those are real, except in the scale of the spending. They're just not that much. And we're not, and it's just the insanity of what's going on. Look, and I'm trying to help understand, wages, let's back up. Tax receipts are up. Spending is up dramatically more. But most of the tax receipts that we're gaining it's almost all capital gains. So of the increased tax receipts, only about 5.5% of it is actually the growth in wages. Almost 65% is capital gains. It's because the stock market's been doing well. So once again, we're back to the world of financial engineering. Those of us with assets, we're doing great. You keep hearing people talk about the K-shaped economy. What they mean by that is if you're on the lower tier, you don't hold assets, particularly after the years of inflation. Those with assets, the assets inflated. They're just fine. If you didn't hold assets, you are poorer today. For my district in the Phoenix-Scottsdale area, I think our calculation is after sort of the first year of the Biden administration, if you don't make today at least 28% more than you did then, you are poorer today. Now there's almost no cycle where magically prices start to come down. The way you deal with this is economic growth, wage growth. Is prosperity moral? Is it Republican or Democrat? It's just the right thing to have a society where their lives get better every day. So, just a board I've used before, but it's just to make a point for anyone that's paying attention. This is the 10-year bond. Right now, the United States isn't at 4%, we're about 4.1. Okay, we can sell a 10-year bond today for about 4.1%. But I need you to look here. Greece can sell a 10-year bond today for about 3.3. When Greece has a better strike, a better, let's call it a credit rating, it's technically not a credit rating, but can sell a 10-year bond cheaper than the United States, should that actually raise the hair on the back of your neck? Are you thinking the fact that the United States on the industrialized countries is like number 12? Let's call it the credit stack, the ability to sell a 10-year bond. Why are other countries able to sell a 10-year bond cheaper than the biggest economy in the world? The country with the reserve currency. Does anyone pay attention to this? Oh, David, that's not fair. Greece engaged in fiscal consolidation. They're actually lowering their debt, where we're now over 100% of debt to GDP, and there's no plans to tell the truth about it. Because if you tell the truth, you might get unelected. You have a dozen countries that can sell a 10-year bond cheaper than the United States today. Greece being one of them. So, let's get into some of the complications. So when I say it's one of the primary drivers, interest and demographics. Remember, if you have 38 trillion, and remember we play this game, the United States does this, other countries don't do this. So here's 30 trillion that we have to go to public markets. people from all over the world, from primarily the United States, buy our bonds. It's in your pension. It's in the banknote you buy. It's this, that. But there's another several trillion that's actually borrowed internally. But it's not magic money. We still owe the Social Security Trust Fund money, the Medicare Trust Fund money. When we borrow the cash out of those trust funds, they are paid interest. So it's still an obligation. And it's one of my great frustrations when you hear some of the government economists, well, publicly borrowed money is this. Yeah, but the internally borrowed money we still owe interest on. Are we not going to pay it back? It's borrowing. And so when I come back and say demographics, understand age groups as a share of the population, 2004 to 2024, so a year plus ago. We had 1.4% of the population was 18 years old. In 2024, 1.3% of the population was 18 years old. It's just demographics. The United States in around 1990, 91 started to roll over in the number of children we have. And for the people who are in the natalist policy, we spend lots of time researching this. There's no magic solution. You have a country out there, when you have your third or fourth child, they buy you a house. Still hasn't increased fertility rates. There's a crazy math set, and I've never vetted it. It was saying, like, South Korea in 150 some years, there's almost no South Koreans left. It's happening all over the industrialized world. This is why getting tax policy, regulatory policy, things so correct, because we're going to have to be able to find a way to have productivity grow and grow and grow so we can raise people's wages, because so many of our brothers and sisters are poorer today. And the way you raise wages is two things. Inflation, well, that doesn't get you anywhere, or productivity. You can't be afraid of AI, synthetic biology, robots. And people go, oh, David, you're not supposed to say that, but it's true. Because next year, the number of 18-year-olds is smaller than this year. And the year after that, it's smaller than that, and it's smaller than that. America is now running into a situation. We have too many classrooms, too many school buses, and not enough senior centers. So this place is doing an amazing job having an honest conversation about the United States demographics and where we're going. Oh, David, we're not supposed to talk about that. How do you make public policy if you can't even be honest about the most basic parts of the math? So the other part of the punchline here. 20 years ago, 12.3% of the population was 65 and up. 20 years later, it's functionally 18%. It's not double, but it's pretty darn close to you double those who are 65 and up. And look, a weird little factoid. When I was a teenager, 1970s, and I remember this number, there was functionally $7 spent for every young person and $1 spent on seniors. Today, that is flipped. It's just demographics. The baby boomers have moved into their retirement years. We have a societal promise we got to keep. We made a promise. But once again, in 7 years, the Medicare Trust Fund's gone. In 7 years, the Social Security Trust Fund's gone. And we're going to lie our heinies off around here. If we just tax rich people more, and I'll show you the slides, the math doesn't work. But once again, we work in a math-free zone. So let's have a little more fun with reality. Change in population by age. Now this board is controversial, but the math is accurate. And I'll see if I can try to describe this in a way where we can all absorb it. 2004, I had functionally 77 million that were under 18 or younger. We estimate in 2035, if we do not have immigration, remember this year we expect almost zero population growth. So let's just first do those that want no immigration. In 2035, we have only 64 million that are under 18. With immigration, you still have fewer people. And that's over 20 years. Okay, fine. Maybe that's a policy, the decision of our society. In that case, don't stand in our way when people like me are trying to find ways to actually have productivity, wages grow. This is something very unique the United States is up against. Massive amounts of debt, massive amounts of debt. Remember, so far this fiscal year, I got to do this math really quick. I think we're borrowing like 130, maybe $131,000 every second. If I take it over the last 12 months, it's like $71,000 a second. So you have this massive debt and then a population that's flat, and where we're going right now, it's actually could be declining over the next decade. Not by a lot. Tell me how I make the economy grow. How do I make sure your pension is there? How do I make sure your access to health care is there? How do I make sure your wages go up? There's ways we can do it. And I've come up behind these mics over and over and over and talked about the adoption of technology, redesigning government. We have bills that actually would save $3 trillion, and I can't get a single other member of Congress to sponsor them because they're hard. I'll get lobbyists who will say mean things about me. So let's keep just doing the shiny objects. Let's just keep doing the petty around it. Maybe we can actually, I think yesterday was the 14th time we've tried to reprimand or censure a fellow member. Let's just do more of that because it gives great Twitter traffic. And we don't have to talk about the fact that that day we borrowed over another $6 billion. Actually, if it's just this fiscal year, it's closer to $12 billion that day. So let's take another look. Change in employment status of native-born and foreign-born. This is something that's really, really interesting. We're actually taking a look right now for what we believe is sort of this fiscal year snapshot. We actually have foreign-born actually going down. Now, some of this is self-deportation, other things going on. We don't have enough data to completely understand it. But my problem is, I don't actually have enough folks for the civilian labor force. And look, something funky happened in this morning's unemployment numbers where a good pop in jobs, maybe almost 2.5 times what many of the economists expected. But did you notice unemployment popped up? Now that's typically saying, oh, we don't like that. I need you to think about this. We've been desperate for more of our brothers and sisters to come back into the labor force. But here's my problem. How many of those folks are coming back into the labor force because they can't pay their bills? Because wages still haven't gone up enough to make up for the years of inflation. We actually don't know completely yet. But we do know our brothers and sisters out there are stressed out of their mind. When you start to look at credit card delinquencies, car delinquencies, our impairments is the better way to phrase it. We need to get our heads out and start thinking about those policies that get the economy working, a tax code that actually gets investment in the next generation. But are we going to adopt policies? All right, let me go jump on a landmine. Does it make sense to have a government that goes out and owns 10% of Intel? So your government is the largest shareholder of Intel. Okay. I love Intel. But I can actually show you some brilliant economic papers that say it should be 3 different companies. Here's the fab, here's the engineering, here's this and that. The concept of creative destruction. Here's how the thought experiment works. If you're old enough to remember Blockbuster Video, should we have slowed down the internet so Netflix could not have put Blockbuster Video out of business? Because that's sort of what we're doing today. is we're choosing the winners and losers instead of the creative destruction that starts the next cycle of productivity. We need the creative destruction in our economy to have the rebirths of the newer, better, faster. And yes, it's always uncomfortable. It's also really great free market economics. And it's as if we've repealed the rules of free market economy in this country right now. So let's actually take another look. Now we're going to step on to the much bigger landmine. Let's talk about Social Security. Social Security finances and workers' benefit ratio. This is how many workers there are compared to our brothers and sisters receiving. Do you see the red lines here? This is actually the trust fund. You'll notice actually around 2020, the trust fund had $5 trillion in it. In 7 years, it's all gone. And no one stole your money. The average couple, it's a crap rate of return. You got to understand, if 20, 25 years ago, you'd been allowed to take a little sliver and put it in the markets, you'd be dramatically better off moving into retirement. But the left lost its mind on the discussion. The unions lost its mind. AARP lost its mind. But now we can look back. We got 25 years. We can actually do the calculation, tell the truth. They were wrong. But it's too late to do anything like that today because the population bubble is already moved into their retirement years. So here we're at. 7 years, that trust fund's gone. But what's also interesting, it's a little hard to see in this chart, as we get in the outer years, you're getting to the point where you have 2.2, 2.3. So you and your spouse, you and your partner, functionally will have one retiree. And that's the way the system was designed. They didn't think about, when they designed things like the Social Security Trust Fund, that we would have a day when the population of young people in the United States actually was declining. It's demographics. We know the math. We've known for how many years we had baby boomers, and 67 million of them. Yet this place, because it's crap politics to tell the truth about math, we lie. We make up things. Well, if we tax billionaires, I'm going to show you boards that every dime of every billionaire in America would only run the government 9 months, and also you'd put the world into a depression because most of that value is actually in stocks. So if you happen to have some stocks in your retirement fund, it's all gone. We're going to crash everything. But it's a thought experiment. And there was someone that had an article out this last week that talked about saying, well, when the Social Security Trust Fund's gone, we'll just borrow it from the general fund, and the general fund will borrow it from the debt market. Okay, let's see. When you start to look at the scale of debt, you see the red here? That's already where we're going. That's already in the baseline. This line here of exploding up, that's as if we took the Social Security Trust Fund, and this isn't even with, I don't believe this even has the Medicare Trust Fund, which is also empty in 7 years. And if anyone really wants to understand how difficult the policy choices are, and also how, let's have a brutal moment, the members here don't tell the truth, particularly my brothers and sisters on the left. We just tax rich people. Please go look up Jessica Riedel's calculations, Manhattan Institute. There's a couple great articles. They walk you through the math. Every tax. So do the Bernie Sanders math. We're going to take people over 400,000, 500,000, and we're going to maximize tax. You maximize everything. And it's almost the Laffer curve. We're going to tax you to the point that it rolls over. On every tax, you get 1.5% of GDP in new taxes. Okay, Probably be really helpful. On the Republican side, the things we talk about cutting, we only get about 1% of GDP. Last year, if you do the internal borrowing, we borrowed about 7.4% of the entire economy. We're actually looking in 2035, we're going to borrow 8.4% of the entire economy. And the solution I get from the left covers 1.5%. Often the solution I get on my side is 1%. Does anyone see the math problem? But we're all going to go home and talk to our partisan audience and say, if I just could tax people, if I just cut things, maybe we have to do that, but it doesn't get you close. Once again, 1.5, taxing all the rich people. 1% of GDP in the cuts we have actually articulated. I got 2.5. In 9 budget years, we're borrowing 8.4% of the entire economy. And that's assuming interest rates don't go up. Remember, in 9 years under today's interest rate scheme, 30% of tax receipts go just to interest. If interest rates go up 1%, it's 45% of all tax receipts of the United States in 9 years would go just to interest. And I'll say this, I've said it how many times behind these microphones, and people will go, David, that's interesting. Please never say that again because I don't want to actually have to explain this. If we do the math, take every billionaire in America, and you could get full face value, sell everything they have, every stock, every yacht, every this, every that, okay, great. You covered government for 9 months. And it's assuming you don't put the world into a depression, you don't crash all the stock markets, you don't crash all the asset markets. It covers 9 months. Why do we live in this fantasy world where people throw out solutions like this that they know are absolute frauds? Because it's great politics, it's crap math. So let's actually go on to one of our current debates. I watched someone come to the floor yesterday on the subsidies on top of the subsidies in the ACA. Let's call it Obamacare because that's the common vernacular, but it's the ACA. And we're having the debate because the Democrats actually did these enhanced subsidies on top of the subsidies. And those subsidies expire. Okay. Well, here, let me do this one backwards so there's a little more understanding of the line. How much of the healthcare population in America is actually in the ACA? It's really important. 48% is employer-sponsored. 7% we believe is uninsured. Veterans are about 3%. Medicare is 18. Medicaid is 22. Now, over the next couple of years, that flips. Only 7% of the healthcare population is actually in the ACA. Okay, that's the entire population that's receiving subsidies today. The enhanced subsidies, so the subsidies on top of the subsidies, is a fraction of that. Now you got to also take a look at what's wrong in that math. We actually keep looking at these numbers over and over and over. We've been analyzing them with our joint economic economists. And I have a couple PhDs in healthcare economics. And we're trying to understand what the hell's going on with these numbers. But you start looking at it after the COVID subsidies. Do you know you got 41% of the population that's actually supposed to be just receiving government subsidy to make it more affordable, and they're paying zero? And you understand what they did with the subsidies on top of the subsidies. They took populations 400% of poverty and up. And in some areas, you have 4 or 5 kids, you had people making $400,000 or $500,000 qualifying. Except that's a small population of them, but they still would qualify. And why this is important, and Mr. Speaker, if I could have some way to burn this into people's psyche, what the ACA Medicare for all. The Republican alternative had better actuarial distribution, but they've tried to turn healthcare into financial engineering. What you've done is financing, is subsidies healthcare. Well, we'll tax these people and we'll subsidize this population. And listen to the debates here. It's about subsidies on top of subsidies. It's financial engineering now is healthcare. And why it's healthcare is because it's easy. It makes the lobbyists happy. It makes the people receiving the money happy because no one gets cut. No one has to do a new design. No one actually has to adopt new technology. No one has to fixate on our brothers and sisters. If obesity is 47% of U.S. healthcare, none of the money goes to making our brothers and sisters healthier so they live longer and they don't have multi-chronic conditions because we're just going to subsidize them. It's perverse. Could you imagine the $35 or $40 billion that the Democrats are demanding for the subsidy on top of the subsidy for populations that are upper income? If some of that money actually went to lowering the actual cost of health care instead of the financial engineering of subsidizing insurance companies. Because that's what they're talking about. Let's just go to this one and see if I can make this make sense. This is a bit complicated, but we've been trying to do the analytics of how much the subsidies have screwed up the price of healthcare. And if you walk through it, you say, okay, we can actually chart where the subsidies come in and it actually raises the price of healthcare. The way the insurance companies retain their profits, we've screwed up the price. We've actually built a model that shows of the stunning amounts of money we're spending, only 34% actually goes to the insured and their health care. Another 28% is disappearing into people that didn't even know. You've actually seen, we all, I'm sure, have been reading the articles that a third, 30% of those in the enhanced ACA subsidies, so the subsidies on top of the subsidies, didn't even know they had health insurance. A couple days ago, you saw someone got convicted of or pled guilty to a couple $100 million fraud scheme where they were signing people up, getting the money, getting the government subsidies, those things. And the people had no idea they had insurance because they really didn't. They were just taking the money. The system is absolutely screwed up. And we have 38% disappearing in the insurance malaise. This is what we've turned healthcare into. It's a financing. I beg of my brothers and sisters here. We have pieces of legislation, dozens of them, that would change the cost of healthcare. When we think we may have spent $25 to $35 billion last year in duplicative MRIs, X-rays, CTs, ultrasounds, why not a simple piece of legislation when you get your MRI, it's attached to this thing so it's portable to your next doctor. Is that scary? Except the lobbyists show up and say, David, you don't understand. The duplicate scans are part of our profit model. Oh, I'm not supposed to say that out loud. We have dozens of things like this. We've turned healthcare into being about the money instead of our brothers and sisters living better, living healthier. How about if some of the money goes to the cures so we don't finance your misery? We finance your freedom from that misery. And I say these things, and tomorrow morning there'll be an army of lobbyists, an army of groups from my district saying, David, you don't understand. We need the cash. Don't make us do it in a modern fashion. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to make the argument. Prosperity is moral. Curing people's misery is moral. Using the technology that makes you sovereign, that makes you free, so you can help take care of your own health is moral. And what we do here is absolutely immoral. We don't tell the truth about the debt. We don't tell the truth about the demographics. We don't tell the truth about the damage we're doing to your retirement, my kids, little kids' future. And we don't tell the truth that if we would actually legalize technology, and I'm serious about this, legalize it, how much healthier every American could be. And we could crash the price of health care. Will this go on dead ears? With that, I yield back.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2025,